So before we get started, introductions from the three guests. I guess we'll start at the end.
Hi, my name is Sam Cassett. I'm a co-founder of a company called Layer, and we make a product called Waves, which stands for Web Assembly System Interface Autonomous Verifiable Service. Sounds much better as Waves. But we make it very easy to build things that consume security from EigenLayer and make the developer experience much better. Also allows you to touch any blockchain, essentially, write to them, and also read from them.
Hey everyone, just gave a talk a few minutes ago, but my name is Ismail. I'm the founder of Lagrange. We're a company that focuses on the intersection of AI and ZK. We build DeepProve, the fastest and most performant ZKML library in the space.
Cool. I'm Yarden. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Authentic. We build the Authentic Stack, which is an AVS development framework, essentially highly versatile, highly configurable in all aspects of the development. We were, I think, one of the first AVSs being built on EigenLayer back then, almost 2 years ago. And now we're building the stack to build AVSs. Today we have more than 50 teams that are using the stack on mainnet, having fun.
I think there's a lot of alpha between these three people. I'm obviously very biased, but I choose to work, in a space with people that I really enjoy and I kind of truly believe in because I have the potential and the options, thankfully, fortunately, to do kind of whatever I want. But the things that I think that are being built by the folks on this stage, to me, are just if you kind of would categorize everything in the crypto space, like the cream of the crop. I really do truly believe that the things that are being built by these founders are kind of there. So it's an honor to kind of be here with you guys. So to kind of build off of that, I want to ask, what are the things that you absolutely hate about the industry right now, and how has that affected your approach to building your company, and how do you kind of I would say, deal with some of the stuff that you see kind of happening as people that are actually building legitimate products that kind of are often, it kind of gets discouraging sometimes. I think I was just talking with Sandeep, who's the founder of Polygon. I was listening to him talk, actually on a panel, and he was kind of expressing, this similar sentiment, and it kind of hit home for me. I was like, yeah, that's interesting, because they're founders that can, essentially put together the most, I would say, efficient and most extractable Ponzi mechanism, and that's where they start their, thought process of building a company from. And then there's people on the opposite spectrum that start from how can I build something that actually provides value that then ultimately becomes worth money because I'm building something that provides value, and you have everything in between. So I'm kind of curious, what do you hate the most about the industry, and how is it affecting what you're doing with your company?
So I appreciate the kind words. Nader, living legend himself in crypto, the best dev rel in the space. I'm going to say something very controversial about what I don't like about the industry, and I'm going to be, rocks are going to come flying on stage. There are too many builders. I want less builders, and I want more commercially minded people building profitable businesses that can sustain themselves on chain. That's what I want. I want less code, less open source repos, less demos. I want people to take their passion for crypto and embody that into a product that becomes durable and that people use. That's what I want more of in crypto.
Yeah, essentially we are in the tech ecosystem, and we need to build products that provide real value to a specific customer segment, right? This is not about decentralization, it's not an edge, right? It's an added value. You need to build a sustainable business that will serve customers. And this is all we need to build. Okay? We need to provide real value to a specific market segment. And this is all it is. So of course we have middleware, infra, apps, consumer, and all of the discussions that are going around throughout the last few years about the crypto space. Essentially, we need revenue-generating business, consumer-facing application, provide real value to real customers.
So also agree with all that, and thank you, Nader. That's very kind of you. I've been in this industry a long time, About 10 years, which makes me like very old, I think. I helped start this company, Consensus, which basically like we told the story of Ethereum, and there was no such thing as like smart contracts before that. Welcome. Obviously the Ethereum Foundation, made this up and Vitalik, but we helped spread the word. And the beautiful thing about that time was that every smart person that was interested in the most interesting ideas in the world came out of the woodwork to help us build that, because they were inspired by the idea that you could have decentralized protocols, or as Ismail said, like self-sustaining protocols that actually create revenue, actually create this sort of equilibrium system that lives on its own. And we'd already seen examples of this, right? Like, for instance, like BitTorrent, right? Like this is something that was real. There's already true product market fit of decentralized protocols. It didn't have the economics part, but this is real, and people saw that you could actually lower the cost of trust. You could change the way that the entire global economy works. And now we have like groups of people that max extract, vertically integrated. They do the marketing, they do the funding, they do the pump and the dump, and they take money from people that don't know any better. And that's sad to me that we've gone from like the most interesting people in the world breaking on the most inspiring ideas to these people that have like ridden off of what like all those interesting smart people did and just sort of like capitalize on that dream. That said, all the people on this stage are doing something real, and we all seek to use these decentralized principles to make something that looks like this equilibrium system that's almost like a life form that can exist without the human governance structures that normally surround economic activity. So that's both the best and the worst.
Welcome, and we apologize for starting before you got here, but do you mind giving us a quick intro?
Yeah, super helpful. I was actually going to ask you what the topic of this panel was, because there's some very interesting people
we're just
here.
like vibe talking.
Let's just vibe talk. Yeah, we're past vibe coding. Let's vibe talk. I'm Eric. I think I gave a talk here yesterday. I'm jet lagged, so I don't remember. I work at the EF and Etherealize. We'll get into why I have 2 jobs later if we want to. We're talking about AVSs, is that right?
Well, we're talking about a lot of different things. I think there isn't, I would say, I think we can open the floor to anything interesting, honestly. Etherealize now, you all are very much in the kind of like top of mind right now, I think. A lot of people obviously have been talking about Ethereum marketing and I would say, lack of excitement maybe in the space from certain people about how things have gone. And Etherealize is a team or a company, I'm not sure exactly how it's structured, but you all are here and put together to kind of like, actually you might be able to explain it better for sure. So what is Etherealize? Like what is the focus and the goal of Etherealize?
Yeah, it's a little confusing because I think if you trace when Vivek and others first popped out onto the scene, it was a very different thing. The team as it is today is 10 people. It's kind of a coalition of folks, like half of us have some ties to the EF. The other folks, Vivek's from TradFi, he's been in Ethereum for a while. Grant Hummer, I think, has been in Ethereum since the early, he wasn't at Consensus, but he was there during the dark days. He's an early supporter. Zach Obrant, he's just a cracked engineer. Like he just crushes every CTF. I don't know. It's great he's with us, but I'm like, usually the security geniuses stay in security. They rarely, I haven't seen a lot of security folks like who are cracked come into products. He's very good. And there's some other EF folks there as well. What are we? We are definitely a company. We are for profit. I think you were talking about this. We need that. We need more of that actually. We need operators who can ship and make money. Open source is wonderful. But Goldman Sachs is not going to fork your repo and trade on chain. That's not going to happen. So someone needs to do that work, right? Like in SaaS, you'll have systems integrators. Like they will come in, they will pitch, and they will deliver you the whole thing and service the thing. We don't. I mean, we have that in some form, but it's not very well developed, right? Like Consensus was arguably the first doing a lot of that work, and there haven't. no one's really stepped into that position to do that, and to do more of that. Like we need people who need to operate.
Just like, probably not that controversial opinion on that, but like, consensus was too early in that sense. We were right on time in the sense of building a lot of things, but the like enterprise system integrator portion of what we were doing, I think that people thought that it would, the market would understand it faster, and so like now if you had done the same thing, I think it would be great. Some of that was too early.
I think didn't really work.
So I'm going to ask a question because I've seen a lot about Etherize on Twitter, and I hope you don't mind me jumping in, but is it lobbying? Is it sales? What is the objective of Etherize? Is it trying to drive institutional purchasing? Is it trying to drive institutional development?
All. It's Palantir. Palantir does all of that. That's the best mental model.
But I mean, Palantir lobbies to be able to sell its own product, right?
Well,
we're talking about.
They wouldn't. Carp wouldn't call it that, but yes.
Right, but the objective function of a company that's lobbying, that is selling a product, is to sell the product. The objective function of a crypto protocol that is lobbying is in theory to sell its token, which is different than the sale of a product. And so what I'm trying to understand is whether you...
that way, I think there's two mandates that we have. One was given to us by the EF, the community, and others, and it is to advocate for Ethereum. That means all sorts of things. That might mean pitching ETH, the asset. So I'm specifically working on that. It's not actually an uphill battle. It's just no one's been able to pull the thesis together. And it's like, yes, get the hedge fund person to do it. The other part is, I'll call it lobbying, but it's not really, like, it's not offensive lobbying of like, we're not trying to box out other L1s. We're more just there to make sure Ripple doesn't take the US, right? Because that's what's going to happen. You can look at their treasury. If they dump it with 95% slippage, they still have $3 billion. That is scary. We don't talk about Ripple because they're not in this room, right? But I'm going to call them out specifically as they predate all of us, right? They almost hired Vitalik. Like, they are in the room.
Imagine no one on, like, everyone's fighting over, like L1s, L2s, all this bullshit on Twitter, and, like, and then you, like, look at the valuation of those people, and they're, like, 1/1000th of, like, Ripple, and no one even talks. So, like, what is actually happening? I mean, I know what's happening, but I'm saying, like,
you can guess what's
put
happening.
it into words.
Yeah, I mean,
it's more, look, I think we exist in an echo chamber. The world does not care about CT and Twitter. We argue over little things that don't matter. Meanwhile, we are getting rugs. And we should not be getting rugs because we build real shit, and we should actually tell the world that.
But part of the concern, so Ripple obviously has an advantage on regulatory capture compared to Ethereum right now, I'd argue. Right, they've spent a lot more.
They would call it regulatory strategy, but sure.
Right, but you know the pitch that they make is very simple, right? It's Swift. What is Ethereum?
It's not a bank server, right? Like that's what Ripple is. It's a bunch of servers that banks run.
But I'm not asking what Ripple is. I'm saying they would say I'm
Ethereum's
Swift,
pitch is, look, zooming out, the world is getting multipolar. Trust is scarce. There's the thing, it's easier for banks and countries to pick the thing that everyone either equally hates or equally loves. That is Ethereum. And if you zoom out, it's interesting because there's really two types of people or customer segments that will pay for censorship resistance. One are individuals who really, really need it, right? These are cypherpunks. Occasionally they're criminals. These are people who are willing to pay anything for mainnet because you can't really be stopped there. There's another customer segment, which are nation states and enterprises. They do not care about mainnet fees. They will pay 10 times the amount because it will give you guarantees that you can actually build a financial system on. If you want to build it in an S3 bucket, you should do that.
But you see how it feels complex, like Swift.
It is complex, but you can reduce anything to a word. I can just say Ethereum, right? Swift is actually quite complex.
Right, but Swift is something that exists, that has existing demand, and so
Correct.
you're positioning the positioning of Ripple, and why I think Ripple has been quite successful, is that they position Ripple as a replacement for a centralized technology. Anyway,
I think I would zoom out from that and say it's a skill issue. It's a skill issue on the part of Ethereum. We just need to push more, right? And if you zoom out, what did COBOL servers replace? A bunch of people running around Manhattan with faxes. That was arguably a complex thing to do. I think we can do the same thing.
Can I try? So, on a number of levels, I totally agree with you, and I think the global regulatory self-enforcing part to me is really the highlight, right? In the United States, and this is actually like a larger criticism of all Web3 that you hear from people that don't understand the global order or disorder, right? Which is in the U.S. or in Dubai or whatever, I can get a bank account, I can do all this stuff. I know that the rules are going to be enforced. If I'm a multinational corporation, if I do work here or do business here, or I do business in the United States, pretty sure that's going to work, and the courts are going to do something reasonable. If I do that in Nicaragua, or I do that in like various like nations in the middle of America, maybe not so much. So how much is it worth it for me as a multinational corporation or a government to be able to have an economic substrate with another government or with my like subsidiary in a country that doesn't really have an organized rule of law? That's an incredibly valuable thing that most people that live in like very developed rule of law places don't appreciate. And that's the disconnect between like the 11,000 like talking heads on Twitter that don't really understand what they're talking about, and all of the global financial institutions that are actually using Ethereum. Like the disconnect is tremendously large, and is based on whether you have any idea of what's going on. Because the actual adoption is on Ethereum, and it's the inspiration for everything else. That wasn't that simple of a thing, but it is. I think that's the locus of where this is real.
I think I might be able to tie this conversation into what we all are working on maybe, and also get your input on this. So Ethereum is kind of known for being incredibly neutral to some extent, right? They don't try to hype up or support certain projects or advertise them over others. You might see a tendency to kind of maybe support optimism over Arbitrum there, and you have the nuances there and things like that happen. But I think one thing that I feel, and I don't know if these other guys maybe feel a similar way, it's like Ethereum is a developer platform that has all these layers that kind of live on top of it that allow people to build in all these different ways. You can deploy to the L1, you can deploy to the L2, you can actually build other types of and other types of I would say techniques that essentially leverage that Ethereum security in different ways, and obviously EigenLayer kind of fits into that scope. Now, you could kind of say, okay, we have Ethereum as the L1. People are building applications there. We have all these different L2s, hundreds, probably even thousands, really, if you kind of really look at it. There's probably a lot of things that have launched that don't really get talked about. But you also have the stuff that kind of we're doing, Ethereum doesn't just power blockchains. Ethereum now powers ZK provers and ZK services. They power these new developer platforms like what Authentic and Waves are building that allow developers to build literally anything in the entire world, conceptually, and make it verifiable. Something that isn't possible on any other underlying network. You can build literally any, I would say, service that you see built as an L1. You could literally rebuild Chainlink but have it powered by Ethereum. I don't feel like Ethereum ever supports any of the stuff that's happening in that ecosystem at all. I feel like there's a lot of potential for almost a win-win scenario to kind of highlight all of these different things that are happening. We have incredible technology that's being built on Ethereum, but if we don't feel that we're having any support at all, what's the point of even sticking around, why don't we just go build somewhere else? I mean, obviously we can get the economic security from Ethereum, but these types of networks should be built elsewhere.
That's great. I used to work with a function in corporates called corporate innovation. This function is in charge of basically what's so-called open innovation, right? In the corporate world, you have this term, open innovation, which means that you need to have, which means that you want to work with external products, external solution, and have high correlation between what the suite of products that you're building. For instance, I used to work with Microsoft and Salesforce for that, and the outside world, okay, which are early stage startups. So how can you funnel down corporate strategy and work with early stage startup, okay, to advance your added value? We have a completely different definition in our small ecosystem to open innovation, okay, which has to be correlated with the real product value, okay, which is not the case as of now, and it's completely related with what you just mentioned. That okay, we have some great stuff like novel innovation that is being built on top of Ethereum, but Ethereum as a whole has no correlation between the business value of this open innovation and the value of Ethereum itself. I gave a talk earlier today about this new paradigm shift between L1 frameworks, L2 frameworks, and what we call AVSs, or off-chain services, and you just mentioned Chainlink. I think Chainlink, the graph, basically the first AVSs, right? They are not blockchains, right? They are not using Cosmos SDK, Polkadot parachain. They are not using OP Stack, Arbitrum Orbit, right? This is not a rollup. This is not an application-specific blockchain. It's a distributed system. It's a distributed network that has unique computational logic, that has off-chain logic, essentially, and the network come on consensus on this arbitrary execution. So Chainlink provides price feeds, started off with price feeds among the rest, the graphs providing off-chain indexing services, but they are not blockchains. Now with basically with Eigenlayer, with Authentic, with Layer, and of course with Ethereum, we can derive this cryptoeconomic security from Ethereum to build these off-chain systems with validation components on top of that. And that's open like completely new type of use cases and innovations that is being built in the space right now. And we can see this, going through Authentic or Eigen website, and the amount of use cases that are being built on top of that. And I hope this paradigm shift will, drive value, will drive real business to Ethereum, to Eigen, and to our ecosystem, so we can all, enjoy this innovative products that are being built.
So to get at your question, which I think was very prescient about, why Ethereum? I think the problem I see with a lot of things in crypto is people aren't playing to win. You look at a business, and the business has one imperative, and the business should make money. That's the reason you found a company. That's the reason you design a business. But most protocols in crypto, that isn't their objective. There's something else that they want. They want to be researchers, right? They want to be scientists. They want people to refer to them as researchers or scientists. Not that they employ people who do research or science to the productive end of founding a business and running a business, but that's their only goal, right? There's a lot of companies, protocols in crypto, that their stated goal is to be decentralized or credibly neutral, not to make money. And that's the problem that we see in the space, because there's a misalignment of incentives. Of course nobody's using something that's goal is just to be decentralized, because the goal isn't to build something that people are willing to pay to use, the way that they would pay to use a traditional business, right? The goal of Slack is not to design a new security mechanism, it's to build a product that people use. And you look at other ecosystems that have designed their foundations and their labs entities in a way that they have an objective to win. Their objective is to build a fast chain that people use and that people pay for and want to build on. How do you quantify usage, fees, and transaction throughput? Simple. No, simple. I mean, some will say TVL is a way to quantify it, but once again, that's the North Star metric, that's the objective function. It's precise. The problem with Ethereum is that it's very decentralized, and there isn't an objective function. There's a bunch of ideological considerations surrounding the ecosystem that detract from the pursuit of a North Star metric that has some quantifiable business outcome. Yet, I still build on Ethereum because I think it is the best ecosystem from a talent quality standpoint. There's much higher talent density on Ethereum than I see elsewhere. But it needs to focus. It needs leadership. And I hope that Etherize does that. I hope that someone can explain to me why Ethereum in one sentence, the way they do other ecosystems. ILBR. No, increased bandwidth. IBRL. Swift. Right? I hope Ethereum can have something like that. But that means leadership.
So I have a lot of mixed feelings about this question. But like to answer the question directly, like why Ethereum? Ethereum is the intellectual core that created this whole thing, and that, you know, other than Bitcoin, which I, you know, pay homage to, but it was the only game in town. It collected the smartest people. It maintained, in the absence of a whole bunch of incentives, you know, on the part of Vitalik and other leadership, like this credible neutrality, which I think allowed a lot of these things to flourish that wouldn't have flourished if we went max business first. I think, you know, I'd be willing to be challenged on that assertion, but I think there was a real fear that had we went full, had the industry gone full business, had the industry gone full like adversary, had the industry not had this almost like white tower or ivory tower feel to begin with, it could have been attacked in a lot of ways that it wasn't successfully attacked, and I think that set a good foundation. But you know, as how much? What's the treasury of the Ethereum Foundation right now? It's not that much. It's like $1 billion. I can be wrong, but well, yeah, maybe like a few weeks ago it was $1 billion, but it's not that much. And you know, versus some other, you know, people that are designed to just like create this like maximal business outcome, that could have been a problem then. I agree though, and I'm hopeful for like some of the leadership that we're really stepping up into kind of wartime mode. But you know, when we talk about like waves, what we're building, you know, the economic security that we're consuming is from EigenLayer and indirectly from Ethereum. And Ethereum, even when I know EigenLayer just announced like the Lombard integration, right? Even though, you know, you're integrating with Bitcoin, still Ethereum is the mechanism by which we're going to do that. And the default, if anyone were to, you know, any like person that's not trying to be radical, if you were to ask like what programmatic framework am I going to use to integrate like massive amounts of liquidity with massive amounts of trust, of course it's Ethereum. Like it's not a question at the moment. And so even though there's all this controversy, even though we need some wartime behavior, it's still sort of the gold standard. And I hope it stays that way. And I think it will, honestly.
In startups, you have this notion of S-curve, right? Every few years you need to innovate in order to stay relevant. And I think Ethereum started off with this notion of world computer and decentralization, right? But along the years, Ethereum have had a hard time to adjust itself to this new, agile, changing environment. This is like our biggest issue. Okay? 2017, okay, great. The world computer and decentralization was a thing. Now we need to adjust ourselves to this, you know, fast-paced environment. And at the lack of, you know, leadership and business objective, this is a completely tough mission.
Care to chime in?
Yeah, lots of interesting thoughts come to mind. I would say, I think the thing I do agree with is there is I'll call it a leadership void in the ecosystem. I'll zoom out and say the EF picked a very specific point on the trade-off curve between telling you what to do versus not doing anything and just letting you do it, right? It deliberately picked that point. I think it was the right point on the trade-off curve. I think what has not happened yet is there are many jobs to be done in Ethereum, right? There is the advocacy job, you might call that go-to-market for normal business, which is explain the thing, sell the thing. That has never been the EF's job. I think the EF has been very clear about that. There is the R&D. This is, I think, the core of Ethereum. This is what people point to when they're like, which ecosystem is the smartest? It's like by far this one. Like it's not even close. Right? There truly is no second best. And then there's engineering, which is when Justin Drake and Ansgar and Vitalik come up with a crazy thing, someone's got to code the thing. It's not them. It's like 20 different teams that do it, right? And there are downsides to that, right? It will take, if there are N teams, it will take you like N as long to fix all the bugs with all the implementations of the same white paper, right? That is the thing that gives us resilience. That is also the thing that slows us down. This is well, I won't get into politics, but you can see the analogies there, right? There are trade-offs. And then there's the like business building side of, okay, you have this open protocol. Well, someone needs to bundle the thing. You don't just use protocols, you use things built on protocols. And I would challenge the like business-minded mindset, which is, I think this is the wrong layer of the stack to talk about the protocol. Like I would say, what is the business objective of HTTPS? What is the business objective of English? These are all protocols. You do things with protocols. You build businesses. And I think I see it mostly as a talent problem, right? Like we are past the R&D phase. We kind of know the answer to most of the big blockchain questions. Like we have solved scalability. We just need to throw more hardware at it. That's like kind of the solution. Privacy is around the corner. Like most of these fundamental research problems are solved and they move along the pipeline of like research into engineering, into product, into things that generate free cash flow. Like that is every single industry. We're just at that really awkward teenage phase where it's like, okay, the thing's almost done. Where's the operators? That's the thing that I think we need to do some more work on.
Right. HTTPS and English don't have assets associated with them, is one thing I would add. I think the complaints that people generally levy against the Ethereum Foundation leadership are tied to the underperformance of the asset compared to a comp set. So,
correct, but I would challenge that and say the EF...
libp2p is an assetless protocol.
The EF does not... the mandate of the EF is not solely ETH the asset. It is Ethereum holistically, of which ETH and Ether is part of, right? But also, you can zoom out and be like, okay, let's say, just as a hypothetical, let's say the EF had an investor relations department. Let's say that actually happened. I don't think the EF would actually fundamentally do a good job of that. Like,
I agree. That it needs better resourcing leadership.
No, I think we have too much of a tendency as an ecosystem to appeal to authority and wait for the EF and Vitalik to save us. And I think let's flip that on its head and say, what is the EF and Vitalik and all the great folks that work there, what are they uniquely good at? And it is two areas. It is R&D, it is protocol coordination. And then if you believe that, then it's like, well, other people need to step up to do the other jobs to be done.
No, I'm aware that they're not doing a very good job of selling the asset, but I think the conversation point is around whether or not there is an obligation of the entity that has constructed and developed the protocol to sell that asset. If you look at the other comp set of Ethereum, besides Bitcoin, you look at Solana, Mistin, Ripple.
Why are we saying besides Bitcoin?
Because Bitcoin doesn't have a central organization associated with it.
Let's follow that logic through.
Well, the founder of Bitcoin has disappeared and has been disappeared for about the existence of the protocol.
I'm saying follow that logic through and just say there's no EF.
Hang on, let me finish. There exists tweets from Vitalik on a regular basis promoting a different technical architecture for the protocol, which introduces risk, which must be priced into the asset. That is a single entity that has an influence on the price of that asset. whose word is viewed as the direction that Ethereum is going to take?
I would say that is reflexive, and I would say Vitalik himself would say, I am one of many researchers. So I would challenge you to be like, Vitalik put something out, you don't have to read it. There's like, for every Vitalik, there are 100 brilliant researchers elsewhere. It is on, like, let's take a very concrete example. He put out something on RISC-V and ZKVMs. There are so many domain experts in that space. And that is one view, and they all immediately came out and they were like, yeah, you should consider this. Like Valida came out and they were like, yeah, I don't think this is a good idea. RISC-0 came out and they were like, we would tweak that. Succinct came out and they were like, oh, this is great. Well, of course they would, right? But I'm just saying, let's not put the EF and Vitalik on a pedestal. They are people, they are doing things. You can also go and do the things. And you can, look, I just think that's the more practical path. And I think the goal of the EF was not to pump the asset or to forever hold the ecosystem's hand. And I think we've gotten to the point where there's enough talent here that other people can just carry the torch, right? And I would say, I don't know, what could each of us do to do more of that?
There's a breadth versus depth problem, right? Like we talk about the talent in the Ethereum ecosystem. There's also a lack of central decision making, and that means that the things that are being built generally are inferior quality.
So yes. Can we hone in on one of the things being built?
Hang on. Look at, for example, FireDancer client, which Solana put a lot of money behind, obviously, versus a lot of the EF clients, Ethereum clients. There is a clear engineering gap between the two of those. You look at, what else did the Solana? The fiber optic company. What's it called? You know the one? Double Zero, yeah. That they effectively incubated alongside Jump. That's an example of an immediately relevant protocol function that they spun out as an independent entity that was incubated, financed by Solana, and they appointed a CEO who was previously at Solana. I mean, this is where you can talk about the depth of what they can do is substantially different. We can have 15 teams debating on Twitter ZKVMs and RISC-V execution environments. We can't have one team building a fiber optic network for Ethereum. We can't have one team building a hyper-optimized client for Ethereum.
You're just describing a stack where there's monopolies at every layer of the stack. I don't think that's something we want.
It's not monopolies. You can go build a Solana client. There's just a specific suggestion in a financed company that is building one at the request of the entity who is developing the protocol.
Yeah, I think that gets, that's kind of the conflict between Ethereum values and other values like centralization and decentralization. Not that the end user actually cares, right? But yeah, I think a lot of the builders and obviously there would be situations where that would. And I know we're getting kind of very close on time, but if anyone wants to chime in before we wrap it up, feel free to.
Yeah, I want to just agree with and expand on something you just said, which I think a lot of the argument here, a lot of the arguments in all human conversations boil down to value systems. When people are talking past each other, it's often because they have a different fundamental thing that they're valuing. And like, a lot of people criticize that, the clients of Ethereum, people want them to run on Raspberry Pis. And people are like, well, why wouldn't you make a fully integrated like data center level hardware stack that, it's like Solana. Those are two fundamentally different values. The way we got there at first was that like anything that was ever a credible money other than Bitcoin and then, second Ethereum, I think essentially, like if it could have been shut down by a nation state level actor, it would have been. And that was the primary consideration when Ethereum was first being designed, is that they will stop this if they can, and it had to be not stoppable. Nation state actors could totally stop Solana. Maybe that's controversial to say. They could stop a lot of chains. They couldn't have stopped Ethereum definitely in 2016.
I mean, that does get at the real underlying question, which is, how do you price censorship resistance? Is this actually something that is valuable to the world? And I think that's the big bet. that I think some ecosystems, and I would say there are two that make this bet. It is Bitcoin and Ethereum. And there are others that make the opposite bet, and it is fundamentally a bet, and things should flow downstream from that. Now, I do think there was a lot of low-hanging fruit for Ethereum. Like, one example might be, it would be cool if someone just forked Firedancer and made a block builder. Someone should do that. I don't know. I won't do it, but someone here should do it.
So I understand the value of censorship resistance. The thing I'm contending is that the correct way to get to the best infrastructure is to just say I want it and hope somebody builds it, right? If we want Ethereum nodes to run on a Raspberry Pi, we should go and pay somebody to build the best possible Ethereum node to run on a Raspberry Pi. That is the difference, right? I'm not saying that we should build all of our blockchains to be hyper-performant with a small validator count, right? I in fact think most blockchains shouldn't do that. That being said, we should set the objective, have it very clear and transparent what the objective is, and then a strategy to execute it. No more of this hopium, I'm going to say what I want and hope that one kind stranger picks up the task.
Maybe we can ask the 2.5 block builders to contribute some of the revenues to buying pressure of Ether. That could be a good one.
If you could unilaterally, let's say, impose a strategic direction, like one directive, like maybe something like, we need a cracked execution client that does this. Like, what would that be? It could be at any level. It could be a wallet, it could be RPC, front ends, like.
What I would do, immediately, I would build a very performant execution client. I would work to improve the networking stack. And then I would increase the maximum stake limit so that things like P2P that are running very, very large numbers of validators no longer need to network between these, right? It's a little bit silly that one entity is going to be running, 2,000 Ethereum nodes when there's already a stake concentration.
Yeah, and they're all sitting in the same box. It's very silly. So
Yeah.
I think the middle one needs to be worked on. I think the first one, Reth needs some time to cook. Lambda class is coming out with a very cool client. And then the last one, I think MaxEV is going through in Pectrum.
And then there's the whole discussion between should we focus on execution or data availability? Why not just come and say, hey, IUDA, let's enshrine you, and we can just focus on just like throttling throughput on the execution and make it the most performant like it could possibly be, and then let IUDA deal with data availability, and boom, you kind of have a core focus. I'm obviously, just kind of like joking here, but but generally at the same time, you want to think outside the box and you want to actually fucking get shit done. You have to really consider what potential options there are.
And then as a single final point, I want there to be someone who has the agency independently to set that direction. I don't want this to be, me having to read through 4,000 threads and guess how the vote's going to go, right? I want there to be somebody who says this is what Ethereum does, who is canonized as the person who has the ability to say that, so that we know what Ethereum will be a year from now, 5 years from now, and hopefully 10 years from now.
That person today, let's abstract away from specific names. Do you think that person today sits in the EF? And then second question, should that person sit in the EF?
I'm fine with wherever we want to put them. I want Ethereum to win, to be very clear. I build on Ethereum, but it needs to play to win.
I'm a Bitcoiner. I don't know why I'm up here.
All right, thanks everybody. We went way over on time. This is a fun discussion, and I value everyone's time. And I know you could have been anywhere, and you all could have been anywhere in the whole city, and you came to hang out here with us. So thank you for that, and I hope you have a good rest of your week.